Do you think high-end home decor has to cost a fortune? Think again. Today I'm showing you how to take thrift store cast-offs and turn them into gorgeous designer-worthy pieces on a minimal budget. Get ready for some easy DIY magic that will totally transform your space. Let's get started.
This is a bean pot. If you don't know what a bean pot is, it's actually a pot where you bake beans into it. You can see how old this is from all the crazing. I got it at the thrift store for $4.99, and the reason I got it is because I loved that brown glaze on it. It was missing the lid, which is fine by me because I'll probably put some florals in it anyway. I'm going to clean it up and get it ready for its makeover. I have truly been inspired lately by studio pottery. I love all the shiny glazes. I love all the colors that you can see that are blended together. And I decided to recreate something like that with this pot. I'm starting off by using one of my blue shades that I used already in this video. And I'm going to be using my Stahlmeister pointed sash brush, which will give me the least amount of brush strokes. I created some wavy lines on the bottom portion of where I painted the blue, and now I'm just using a smaller brush to make the line look a little bit more clean. The reason I did this is because some studio pottery looks like it has a glaze on it that would maybe be only partially dipped, or it would have a little bit of a drip to it. I wanted this to look really organic. Once that base color was dry, I used this little chip brush and started with the next color of paint, which is sort of like a blue-green, probably like a deep aqua, maybe you could call it. And I'm just going ever so lightly onto the pot. I want there to be some texture, and I want there to be a little bit of depth with the color. Again, my rule of thumb is to use a very light touch to start, and if you want a little bit more, you can add it later. I really love the glaze on the brown because it was really easy to just use my finger or a paper towel and wipe off any of the paint that overlapped. I could have stopped here, but I decided to add a little bit more color with this sort of beigey caramel color. And I think it's turning out really pretty. It's really an inspiration. It's something that I am looking not at something, but I have sort of something in mind of what I have seen before. So I'm just trying to recreate it to the best of my ability. Here's an example of some studio pottery that is vintage, and this is sort of the vibe that I'm going for. I apologize, this is hard to see because I'm almost off the screen, but I'm taking a small artist brush and going into that same sort of beige caramel paint, and I'm just drawing a line right on top of the blue just to give it more definition. Now, once I get this done, I find that I don't like it as much as I thought. So the look in my head that I was going for didn't transfer out onto the project. Paint can be covered, it can be changed. It really doesn't matter if you make an oops or if your vision changes as you're crafting. What I decided to do was take that same paint and just drag it up just a little bit into the blue and then use my finger to kind of dab it and blend it in. And that started to look a lot nicer. I let the pot sit overnight, and when I got into my craft room the next day, I decided that it was still a little not finished. I liked the beige paint on it, but I found that it was a little overwhelming when you looked at it from afar. So I'm taking another little chip brush and some navy blue paint and very lightly just going through it, adding a little bit more color and just a little bit more variation to it. You may be thinking, wow, Sandra, that's a lot of work. But to find a pottery piece like this at an antique store or a vintage market, you'd be paying probably hundreds of dollars. Even something that is brand new is going to run you a lot of money. So why not find something that you can create yourself? It'll fit perfectly into your decor and make it yourself. It's just so much fun to play around with all of these different colors. And as I said earlier, if it doesn't work out and you don't like it, you can always paint it over again. I decided to add some of the dark blue to the top rim, and that just kind of brought everything together. It's all really beautifully blended, and I'm really loving this look. If you thought I was done, I've got one more color for you. This is called Coffee Bean and it's from Folk Art. And I'm going to be using the same chip brush and I'm adding some of that brown into the very bottom. I found that the stark line between the blue and the dark brown just needed a little bit more of a blending of it. So I'm just using that color, blending it in a little bit, and look at how pretty. I added a little tiny bit of the brown on the top of the rim, and once it dried, I gave it a couple of coats of gloss spray paint in clear just to seal it up so it wouldn't chip. Here's how it turned out. This is another one of my blue glass collections, or green or seafoam, whatever color you want to call it. You can see that it has all sorts of grapes and leaves on it, so it was definitely meant as a wine carafe. It did not have a stopper, which is fine. I don't use the stoppers anyway. And I'm going to be taking some of this white macrame cord that I picked up at my local dollar store. I'm going to start at the bottom using hot glue and I'm going to cover all of that design that's on there. I thought I would be able to get away with only putting some hot glue in a few spots. This cord is so soft that I needed to put hot glue on every single portion of it. So this took me a little bit longer than expected, but I just turned on some of my favorite YouTube channels and listened to what they were doing, watched what they were doing a little bit, and before you know it, I was done. One thing that I was concerned about is that the grapes on this jar were just sticking out so far. I thought that maybe this cord wouldn't cover it up properly and maybe you would still be able to see a little bit of the outline. But I was wrong, pleasantly surprised, I guess. It all covered up really beautifully. Once I got more towards the top, I was really loving how this was turning out. And I'm just going to be going up until I cover up those little fronds that you can see. There's still a couple of little lines peeking out from the grapevine leaves. And I'm just going to go up there and then complete it. I want the blue glass on the neck of the bottle to stay as is. Project number 2 is a little bit of a fail first and then a success. I took some plaster of Paris, I mixed it in with some water, and I went ahead and started painting it on top of this really slick glass vase. I missed a step. What I did miss was not spraying it with some clear spray first, or maybe even a coat of white spray paint. I'm using the plaster of Paris because I wanted to get some really good texture to mimic this inspiration. This vase is by McGee & Co. It's listed for $175 in US, and I really loved the look of it. I loved the texture and the fluted part of it. This vase I picked up for $3 at the Goodwill. It has the fluting, but it's opposite of what the McGee & Co. is showing. But I was okay with that because it still turned out really pretty. What I'm going to end up doing is removing all of this plaster of Paris, because even when it dried and I started to put on a second coat, it reactivated the first coat and everything just started peeling off. So back to the baking soda method we go. I'm going to add some white paint and a little bit of this taupe colored paint in to give this an off-white shade. I've already spray painted the vase and given it a couple of coats of white chalk paint. You could use clear spray paint. You could even give it a coat of Mod Podge, and that would help your paint stick to it better too. When you're adding the baking soda, it's going to thicken up really quickly, but just keep stirring it and it will all blend together. The more baking soda you add, the more texture you will get. I just want a little bit of texture on this, so I'm probably going to be adding a little bit more, and then I'm going to start painting. For the first coat, I'm just going to use an up and down motion and just cover the whole thing. And then for the second coat, I'm just going to go in strategic areas and add some texture. So there's a little bit of a raised area in some spots and not in others. There are many ways and textures that you can get using baking soda. If you only add a little bit to acrylic or latex paint, you'll get more of a chalky finish. If you add a little bit extra, like I did for today's project, you'll get some nice texture and a rough look. If you added even more and made it super thick, if you added even more baking soda and made your paint super thick, it would go on with a really thick texture. The other thing you can do with any type of baking soda paint is use a stippling brush, and that will bring out even more texture and give you a completely different look as well. Let me know down in the comments if you have tried using baking soda in different ways on any of your DIY projects. This last project is another super easy and inexpensive high-end decor dupe. It's inspired by this black pitcher from West Elm, which is a beautiful shape, and it has a really pretty matte finish. It retails for $79 and is also available in white. I found this pitcher at the Goodwill for $3, and all I have to do is take some clear matte spray paint and give it a really nice even coat, let it dry, and it's going to turn into a beautiful matte pitcher. I love how this one turned out, and I really love when they're this easy to do. Thrift stores have an endless supply of vessels and vases, and you can just go and find the shape that you want, and it makes no difference what color it was. This one was from Value Village, and it was $3.49. I'm going to start off by giving it a nice dark base coat. This is called Espresso by Rust-Oleum. It's in a satin finish, and I'm going to go over it a couple of times very lightly just to camouflage that pink. I've taken a bit of sponge and kind of torn a little bit out of it to give it a little bit more texture. I'm just going to go ahead and start using this French linen color. This is by BELLE. It's their chalk mineral paint. And I'm really excited to share with you that my good friend Sonia, who I am collaborating with on this video today, is now an affiliate for BELLE. She has a link down in her description box underneath her videos. I have started using the BELLE line because of Sonia, and I really love the paints. Right now, I've only used the chalk mineral paints, but I have 3 different colors, and this French linen is a beautiful blend of beige and gray, what I like to call grayish, and it's very similar to the mushroom color that I've been using for a really long time and I'm slowly running out of. So if you like this type of color, head on over to Sonia's channel. Click the link in her description box and go check out all of the wonderful paints that are available through BELLE. Once I finished with the French linen, I switched over to this color from Folk Art. It is just an acrylic paint, but it's called Coffee Bean, and I thought it would be the perfect sort of brown, rusty kind of look and just give a little bit more depth and a little bit more texture. I'm going to continue adding the coffee bean color until I get it looking the way I want. It's not going to be an exact replica of those high-end pieces that I showed you earlier, but it's going to look the way I want it to look. Looking at those high-end websites or stores for all of this is really just inspiration to create something that looks very similar to it, that is on budget and something you can afford, but has that high-end look. I wanted to try the BELLE paint on a shiny surface, and so I'm using the French linen on the bottom. And let me tell you, the coverage was fantastic, and I only needed 1 coat, and it sticks so well to slippery surfaces. I know that with some other chalk paints, I've had to go and spray a primer on it first, either the same color or a clear coat to make sure that my paint sticks. This I had no problem with. I'm using a little stamp that came from a pack from the Dollar Tree, and it's a crown. I'm dipping it into some black ink, and I'm just going to put it down on the bottom of the crock, right on top of the French linen. A simple, quick, and easy DIY.
I upcycle a lot of canisters and teapots and things that have a shiny surface. So the first thing I like to do is give them a coat of matte clear finish by Rust-Oleum, and that just helps the paint stick a lot better. I'm giving this piece 1 quick coat of my DIY chalk paint in white. I have done the baking soda mixture paint on a bunch of different projects before, but I realized today that I've never used white paint. I've always done a colored paint. So I was really excited to try it with the white. So I put a decent amount of the baking soda into my paint. I would say it might have even been half and half, kind of, or maybe just a little bit extra paint. You can always just work with the texture and see how you like it, but this turns out really nice and thick, and that's what I was looking for. I'm just going to use a small brush and go ahead and add all of this onto my canister, making sure I get the rim and inside the rim a little bit as well. Once the paint was completely dry, I'm using this Home Decor clear wax, and I like to use clear wax because then I can tint it any color I want rather than going and buying black wax, white wax, brown wax. So it just makes it go a lot further. What I'm adding to this wax is a little dot of Parisian gray chalk paint. I just want this to have sort of a gray beigey kind of look, and it turned out perfect. I'm adding the wax mixture just to the label portion of the canister. I didn't want to do anything else with it. I wanted just that label and the scroll work around it to pop. So I'm going to add a generous amount of the wax, making sure I get into all the little cracks and nooks and crannies. And then I'm going to take a paper towel and just dab off the excess. If you try this technique, just make sure when you're going around the edges where the scroll is that you take a clean section of the paper towel because you don't want to reapply that wax onto the rest of the canister.
My second project is using this glass vase for $3.99 from Value Village. I did get 20% off of it because whenever you donate, you get a 20% off coupon. That's good for the whole year. I'm using the same Drydex spackle, and this time I'm using the right glove. I forgot that I had these, so it would have been much easier to be able to use these in my first project. Anyhow, I'm going to take the Drydex, and I started putting it on sideways, and then I realized I didn't want that kind of texture. I wanted it to be more of an up and down smooth texture like this. So I just changed direction, but I'm going to do the same thing as I did with the small candle. I'm just going to cover this whole jar with the spackle. The inspiration for this project came also from the Pottery Barn Summer Lookbook. These 3 vessels, they're ceramic, blue and white, set of 3 for $329. That means one of them would be just over $100. There's no way you need to spend that kind of money to get beautiful decor when you can do it yourself. To make sure that this piece doesn't look like spackle on top of glass, I'm going to go over the very top rim of it and a little bit down inside the center to make sure that if you're looking at it closely, it looks like it's completely ceramic. The inspiration for this had some texture, but it really was more smooth than anything. So what I'm doing here is just using my fingers to gently tap down any of the high spots. This spackle is starting to dry a little bit, but it still has a lot of moisture in it, so I'm still able to mold it the way I want it to look. The other thing that this bottle had, and I'll show you again the picture here of which one I'm replicating, it had some sort of divots in it or thumbprints maybe. So I'm going to be using my finger and just kind of pushing it in to get some of that texture too. I always let my spackle pieces dry overnight or 24 hours just to make sure that they're completely dry. And I love this pink Drydex that goes white when it's dried because that's a really good telltale sign that it's ready to be painted or sanded or whatever you need to do to it next. This wide flat brush is making it super easy for me to create the blue line around the center of this vase. I'm not too concerned about whether I have some clean edges. I'd really like it to look more organic and not so perfect. For the alternate color, I'm using a mixture of this sort of beige paint. It has a little bit of a yellow undertone to it, and I'm going to be adding some of my white to make a really nice, creamy, old, aged looking color. This color turned out exactly the way I wanted it. It's sort of a creamy white color, and when I put it on the spackling, which is more of a pure white, you'll be able to tell what the color is. And I think it looks absolutely beautiful. Here's a look at how this piece turned out.
We wanna chase the night, wanna dance to the light, pull the stars from the sky, just two hearts running wild. Never sleep, never stop, as we shout from the top. We're gonna be two hearts running wild.
I'm always on the lookout for little white containers at the thrift store. This one was $1.99. I am going to remove that nautical rope there. I just don't think it fits in with it. I'm starting off with this color that's called clay, and I'm using a really chunky stippling brush, and I'm going to just go over the jar. I started at the bottom, and now I'm just going to start kind of going in lines all the way around. I want some of that white to show through just a little bit, so I'm not going to make it a solid color. Then I'm going to switch it up and start with a different color and do the same technique. Next, I'm using my favorite color, which is mushroom. You guys hear me talk about that color a lot on my channel. And I'm doing the same thing, just stippling it around so it gives it a little bit of texture plus the color. I didn't wash my brush. All I did was take a paper towel and I wiped some of the darker paint off and then just started with the next color. And then I'll do the same thing with the final color. This color is called Parchment. It's a Craft Smart paint that I got from Michaels. I don't know if they carry them anymore, but it's basically just an off-white. And it's almost the same color as the little jar was initially. It's just going to freshen up that very top edge. I'm really pleased with how my projects look today, and I hope you like them as much as I do. Here's how they turned out. Shopping at thrift stores is a lot of fun, but it can be a little overwhelming. Sometimes when I'm in the clear glass section, there are so many pieces that it's sometimes hard to choose. So, what I like to do is look for unique styles and shapes, different sizes, and this one was absolutely perfect. It is a narrow vase, but it's wide and it's got these beautiful soft edges and then just a little bit of a spout on the top. I really bought it because I love the shape of it and I loved the actual little bubble dots that you can see in it. So there's all sorts of glass bubbles in here, but it was sitting around too long. I think I've had it for over a year, and my style right now doesn't really include glass or clear pieces. So it's getting a makeover. The color I'm using is a chalk paint and it's called Mushroom. Now, this was just a latex paint that I added a little bit of talc to create a chalky finish. Whenever I use this color, I get a ton of you asking what the color actually is. It was a paint that I used in my living rooms for the walls, and I just had some left over, so I created my own chalk paint with it. I can't give you the color because I don't have that information anymore, but I do have some similar colors like this listed on my Amazon store in chalk paint, in acrylics, and there's a bunch of them to choose from, and they're all very similar to this shade. I gave the vase only one coat of the mushroom color because I knew I was going to do some kind of texture design on it. I chose to start with black down at the bottom, and I'm going to do probably about the bottom third of the vase just with this black chalk paint. As I was putting this on, I realized I should have done the top texturing first before I started drawing this line. But that's okay. The second coat will take care of any imperfections when I do my second technique on this vase. Here on my channel, I try to use materials that you are going to have around the house. This is simply a kitchen sponge that I cut down and I pulled off some of the bits so it wouldn't have a straight edge. I'm also just using regular burnt umber acrylic paint that you can get at any dollar store. Having the lighter color on the bottom and then doing some of the sponging with the burnt umber on the top is going to give it a beautiful stippled texture. Using a light touch when you're pushing the sponge onto the vase will make sure that you don't get any patterns from the sponge. You can also turn the sponge, as I just did here, to get even a little bit more of a different texture. I'm going to leave mine just with the burnt umber like this because I really loved how it turned out. But you could definitely go a little bit further, maybe adding a little bit more depth and dimension with some more black, or brightening it up a bit with a little bit more of the mushroom paint on top. I gave the bottom of the vase where the original black was another coat and fixed up the line between the brown and the black. Then I decided I wanted to have a little bit of continuity in my design. So I'm using a small paintbrush and going inside the mouth of the vase, but I'm also going to be adding a little line on the top of the vase. So just something, a little tiny accent that's going to bring this whole piece together.
I hope you enjoyed these 10 creative ways to upcycle thrift store finds and got some inspiration to create some yourself. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today. I really appreciate it. Bye for now.